Hey, Alex here from the Siebel Hub. So, you're about to watch a rest-along demonstration video of the latest features of the Siebel inbound REST API. If you're really new to the REST API or new to Siebel 22, you have upgraded to your project and you want to know the latest and greatest, then check out the Knowledge tab on siebelhub.com. Go to Siebel CRM training and you can look at all the courses, but we could look at the Siebel 22 workshop. And let's jump right to the modules. And there, right in front of you, is the REST API module. So each and every module of our online video trainings consists of a video training, which is basically a shop product. So you can add it to your shopping cart, swipe your credit card and start learning immediately. And make sure you check out the description for the value that you get for this very reasonable price. The version at recording time was 22.1, and you could say, hey, that's not for me because we're using 22.5. Why this old stuff is here? Well, we can't possibly record every module every month. So what we do is have free monthly updates on the YouTube channel, which you are using right now. So if you follow that link, check out the description of this video for the links too. And there you can see there's a 22.2.3.4.5 update. There will be a next one soon when it becomes available. And so these videos have used chapters, so it's easy to identify, is there anything relevant for, let's say, the REST API? Check out the description. And yes, there's a chapter on the pricing administration REST API, which was added to 22.5. So yes, there is something about REST API, and you can just click on the timestamp and start learning about this new feature. And that's how you add learning to the course materials that you purchase. Just want to make sure you know about this. And that's the video training you get. And with the video training, we also have PDF materials that you can purchase as well and download. So there's a link in the description of the video training taking you to the PDF course materials. So here you go. And you can check that out in the shopping cart as well. And then download your personalized copy of the PDF course materials, presentations, and exercise guides and solution files if available. So again, there's a lot of value for your money. Let's go back once more to the Siebel 22 workshop. And you can go about and purchase each individual chapter, but if you're really interested in getting the entire course, then make sure you get the complete course. Follow the link. And that includes the course materials, includes all access to the videos, including any new videos that we add over the year, like the data visualization video we just added for 22.5. It's hot and new. Make sure you get it. And it's included in the complete course, including the PDF material for, again, a very competitive and reasonable pricing. That's 30 plus hours of videos, 1,000 pages of materials. So, and with that, let's get right into the rest along, where you will learn to, well, work with attachments and custom business objects. Hello and welcome to this rest along video. My name is Alexander Hansal. Happy that you can join me. So what you're looking at is a custom screen I created showing tickets, and you might guess that this is a blatant copy clone of service request list applet, service request business component. It is all custom. So we have a custom BizComp, custom business object here, and created the applets and views necessary to test. And if you drill down, on a record here, you see that the detail view has attachments and notes. So I created these by copying business components from the service request attachment. So here we see with DevPops, we can visualize the business component names. So BCRM tickets, the primary, and here's the link. So BCRM ticket attachment is the child BC. And that's all very, very straightforward. So just taking copies, and even the field names I did not change. So it's all the vanilla field names in these cloned business components just for simplicity. And the reason why I created this custom screen with 2 views and a little business object is that we want to explore how to use the REST API to work with custom business objects. So here we are in Siebel Tools, taking a under the hood look at this custom business object that I created. BCRM ticket by name, primary BC has the same name, and it's just 3 business components. So the ticket, the primary attachment, and notes. And your mileage, of course, varies, and you have much more time and create much more complex business object, but you get the idea. So here in the true iconic style that only Siebel Tools can deliver, we take a look at this business object and its hierarchy. And of course, it's very simple. So with this business object in place, let's create a custom integration object. So what I'm doing here is I'm creating a workspace. And now that the workspace is editable, I go about and start the wizard for integration objects. And I'm selecting any project, doesn't matter. And the source, of course, is EI Siebel Wizard. We want to create the integration object of the custom business object, which I named BCRM ticket here. And the source, it must have at least one primary, or it must have a primary, of course. And the name is very important. Prefix space and space before the business object name. It has to be exactly that, otherwise it would not work with the data API of the Siebel inbound REST API. So base BCRM ticket is the name of the new integration object. And it has pulled a lot of multi-value links, which I don't really need. So I just make sure that the 2 child business components are included, attachment and notes. And those with the underscores, they are derived from the multi-value links in those big copied business components I have. So this is going to have 3 integration components. And hitting next. And it informs me that the calculated fields have been deactivated by default, which is fine by me. And you can't do much about it anyway here. So you have to finish the wizard. And yeah, Siebel Tools does not know about integration objects right now, but let's change that. So just expanding the Object Explorer here to see everything. So let's find the new integration object. Goes by name of base, BCRM ticket. There it is. And of course you want to see, did the wizard create the correct integration components? Yes, it did. We have the primary, we have 2 children, and we want to work with attachments here. So the attachment integration component is of great importance here. It must have that field with data type attachment. It's called an activity attachment ID here. It can have any name, of course. Don't change anything, just check this system field is there. And also, of course, the other fields you want to keep, probably. No need to go and deactivate much here, because it's a base integration object that supports all kinds of queries and insert update. And let's compare it with a standard base integration object like base account. This is a standard one by Oracle. And this one has the attachment child BC account attachment too, and of course has different field names. But here as well, there's the D-type attachment system field here. And if you look at the integration component keys, think about we will try to insert or write records, so we need a key. And there's this REST row ID key based on the ID field. And that's quite clever. What Oracle did here was adding that key. So you can basically use the row ID as a key. And now I'm going to the ID field is of course available as a result of the wizard. Just check that. And so now in the custom integration object, let's check out the integration component keys. And the primary one doesn't have any. The wizard couldn't create any. And the notes one too. And just for the attachment, there's a wizard generated key. We must change that. So we must create at least one key. So this is the primary and can have any name. Sequence 1 and must be a user key. And in the component key fields, just add the ID field. And that's all you need to get it to work with the REST API for write operations. Of course, you might want to add more keys, but that's okay. And here this wizard generated user key in the attachment integration component, we actually replace in the sequence. We create that REST row ID key. And the wizard generated, I could deactivate, but I decided to make it sequence too. And again, it's the ID field that we need to add to that special, well, it's an ordinary user key, but it's based on ID. And repeat that one more time for the ticket notes, the child component, just for completeness. Okay, so that's the tiny manipulation you need to do. And if you want to use that base integration object for more than just queries, so you need to have keys on each integration component, and ID, using the row ID is a pretty nifty trick, because if the row ID doesn't exist, it will create the record. If the row ID exists, it will update it if you use the put operation, as we will see later. Okay, so we haven't delivered the workspace yet, but we're about to test. So on this machine, it's a fresh sandbox machine. I don't have Postman, so just go about and download Postman from the internet. So that Windows 64-bit version will be just fine. And let's download it. So running the installer now. Of course, if you have any tool capable of doing a REST request for testing, such as Postman, SOAP UI, or you name it, you don't need to follow that installation. So Postman is about to start. Okay, let's skip that. Don't need an account or anything. We just want to use the free portion of the Postman app here and create a new request. And it's literally a first test here. So I have an AI endpoint URL. I'll just copy from the browser. And v1.0 after Siebel. That's the REST API /data. I want to get some data. Account means business object and business component is account. And I add /describe. Then go to authorization, make that basic auth. That's probably the default you have on your environment too. And enter a valid Siebel user, and then send it off. And yeah, I have a self-signed certificate, so I have to disable the SSL verification here. But then after a few tense moments, there is a response from, well, the Siebel inbound REST API. That's the EI object manager is up and the REST API has been set up correctly. And now, of course, we want to try not with account, which is a standard business object. We want to try with the custom business object. Now you would say, hey, you haven't delivered. But bear with me. So I want to test it before I deliver it. So I'm using the business object name and the business component name, just the primary business component. I simply want to describe, and of course it fails. Yeah. Alex, you don't really know your stuff. You have to deliver this, right? No, I don't. I can add a argument called workspace and enter the name of the workspace where I have created this integration object. And it will pick the latest version if I don't specify version. And the describe should actually read the integration object definition now and give me a Swagger document right away. So we can at least declare victory here that, well, I typed correctly and the EI object manager can find the base integration object. You use the business object name and it maps to the base integration object automatically. So let's take this up a notch. Let's do, for example, a query. We want to see some data. There's some tickets in my database already. And child link. Okay, let's not do child links because they're just 2 children. Let's just send it off without describe, but with the workspace name. You don't need to add version, so you get the latest and you get some real data. So that's really pulling the data. Get means query, and you get all the fields. And since I copied the service request BC, that's an awful lot of fields. So let's specify with the fields argument SR number. And it should just get the ID and SR number field along with the child links. Now the child links should include the nodes and attachments, and that's true. So just seeing them. And here, this SR in the database, it's the first one here in the REST response. It has an attachment. So let's try to query for that attachment first. We're still in unit test mode. So there's a child link to get the child records for the BCRM ticket attachment, child BC. Simply copy paste that and get the data. And okay, copy paste destroyed the workspace name here. So we have to add that again. Okay, now this should yield some data because there's an attachment record, and here it is. This is the attachment record. You can't see the attachment here, but you see the activity attachment ID. This system field is actually provided as a URL. Now that's a result we can live with, and we declare unit test successful. So let's deliver that stuff. So we don't have to add the workspace name every time we test. So here I'm just doing the usual and delivering that developer workspace. Nothing to see here really. Okay, it's done already. Speeding things up a little bit. And now I should be able to, well, test it without the workspace name, which is true. So here we go. And let's copy that URL of the activity attachment ID. So that's a trick. Take that URL. So you see that it pulls one attachment by row ID and then just selects that field. And okay, what I'm looking at, it's a zip file. and Postman tries its best to, well, show it to me. It's okay. It's definitely some binary data. And now I'm adding inline attachment. So adding inline attachment true, and that gives you the base64 encoded file in the response from the Siebel AI. And that's JSON. So let's pick up the raw JSON. Now I have a good test case, actually test data for inserting an attachment because I have a huge base64 string generated by Siebel. Of course, that's now we're switching the test to actually inserting an attachment with the REST API. So what I'm doing here is grab this huge, humongous base64 string. You have to be quite careful. And in real life, this base64 string is generated by some, well, system before calling the Siebel REST API. And just make sure copy it correctly. There we go. That's the end of the base64 string. Let's go up, and activity attachment ID is the correct field name. So basically I have a field, a name, and a value, a very huge value, and I'm going to use that to create the payload for the put statement. So I want to add an attachment to an existing record. So the payload is the name of the business component, the child business component. And also there are some fields you need to set. There are usually required fields, etc. So let's take a look at the custom attachment BC we have here. And those field names might vary depending on which BC you cloned. This was the service request attachment BC, which I cloned, and obviously it was cloned from activities, hence the funny file names with activity file name. So that's the file name field visible in the applet. And that's the file name. So let's call it big archive. Can have any value. And there's a file extension field. And in my case, it's called activity file ext. And the value for it is zip. That's the file extension. And the third field I'm adding is the name or ID field, actually, the activity attachment ID, as it's in my case. So you need to figure out that field name and then, well, make sure that you can add a base64 encoded string, which represents an actual file. Okay, so that looks quite good. And that's a sample payload that I will copy paste into Postman in a few moments. Just make sure I save it so I can reuse it later. Okay, so save it as a JSON file. And that will also validate the syntax a little bit. So make sure you don't have any typos here. Okay, so here goes nothing. Copy that and make sure it's a put request. And we have an existing record. So here the next record is a different ticket. And it has no attachments. So we grab the row ID of that record. So we're going to literally attach an attachment to this record. So we need the row ID in the URL. So that's the primary BC. That's the row ID that identifies the record. And in the body, which by the way must be empty for most requests, but for a put request, the body, so empty means an empty object, empty brackets. So now, of course, we have a real payload. I copied that. The payload I prepared. So literally means, okay, here's a business component, child business component with the name of BCRM ticket attachment, and a huge base64 attachment. So when I send this off, let's see what happens. And I get a 200 result with a row ID for an attachment and some links. So that looks good. 200 is good. And let's query on that attachment list, and voila, there it is. The big archive zip file. Is it really a zip file? Let's download it. We want to know exactly what goes on. So I download it and can I open it with 7-zip, and yeah, it's a perfectly fine zip file. It was a bunch of strings, a bunch of characters, and now it's a zip file. Can't get over that. Okay, so we have successfully attached an attachment to an existing primary record, but what is if we want to create that primary record and attach the attachment? Okay, let's try that. So next thing we try is, well, we want to create a new record. So we still keep put, remove the row ID because it from the URL, and here that's the field list of the primary record. And I'm just using ID because there's lots of default values. You might want to add more fields here. And notice I use dummy for the ID. I don't care what the row ID is here because it will be different. So there's only one field that I fill in for the primary record, and it's a dummy row ID, but I get the real row ID back. So check out Postman again. So here the response, we have the real row ID of the new record. So that's a ticket or whatever primary record row ID. Let's query for that. It hasn't existed a few moments ago. And of course it exists now, and it has the attachment. So you can insert, basically you can insert the primary record and any number of child records in one go. That's the inbound REST API. And that's it. So thanks very much for watching this REST along video. Take care and bye-bye.